Thank you.
There you go.
There we go. There you go, sir.
All right, there we go. Like, yes, on Facebook, we missed the introduction, so I'll just do a brief one and try to keep it really brief. But yeah, my name is Kurt Ratzlaff. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay if I do that?
Sir.
Perfect. I'm gonna put this thing down.
Okay, so the only reason that's there is just for the recording sometimes.
Does that help?
It's good. It's
It
Okay.
does, it would be helpful to have the mic.
It would? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
overruled.
We're all overruled, right? By that.
Sure.
There we go. All right. Well, my name's Kurt Ratzlaff. And Steve was just nice enough to give me a little introduction here. But just to kind of go over it briefly online, I helped originate the Kansas Backcountry Hunters and Angler chapter here in Kansas. Was the chapter chair for 5 years. Currently hold the position of legislative chair for Kansas BHA and also kind of I'm the administrator, although there's not really an official term, for a group that we started here a few years ago called the Kansas Outdoor Heritage Alliance. I'm also in a lot of other groups. That's the ones that most folks associate me with. But I do want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come and talk to you. I appreciate Steve putting up with me to get me here today. I'm not the easiest guy to keep in touch with. I understand that, and I appreciate your patience because I do tend to spend a lot of time out away from my house and my computer and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate your patience on putting up with me on that. Also, like, I'm not a tech guy. I still like live under a rock. I don't do PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. So what you see is what you get with me today. I'm just going to be standing here talking to you. But so Steve asked me to talk about preserving, maintaining, and ensuring access to Kansas outdoor resources. And, you know, we here in Kansas have incredible outdoor resources. We really, truly do. We are blessed in so many ways that it's unbelievable. Some of us have trouble accessing those resources, gaining access to them. I mean, if you think about it, like we've got a lot of state fishing lakes, you know, Leavenworth State Fishing Lakes, pretty close here. Steve and I have done some volunteer work out there as well. Cut down a bunch of cedar trees here a few years ago, and then the folks used them for fish habitat after we cut them down, that kind of stuff. But there are people who have a difficult time accessing what we do have. And I want to kind of go through the reasons why that is, what we can do to help out with that, and that kind of stuff. And so kind of a little more background on me. I don't have a bunch of letters after my name in wildlife biology or management or anything like that. I'm not a government official of any kind. I'm a person that loves the outdoors and have since I was a kid. For whatever reason, I love taking other folks outdoors. I think basically kind of it comes down to like a real simple thing. Like I like to break things down pretty simply. I think when you spend time outdoors, you become a better person. And I think the more people that we can get outdoors, the more we're going to have better people. You know, keep extrapolating that out, and you can help society as well. But I really do believe that. And I didn't know that I was thinking that as a kid, but I think even as a kid, I was doing that. Like I was taking my buddies out. I'd go do something and have fun at it, and I'd want to take my buddies too. That kind of stuff. And so, and I've pretty much just kind of continued that my whole life. Done that as long as I can remember. But I'm not a trained expert. It's just something that I've been passionate about my whole life, and just learned a lot of stuff as I went along. I like to learn, I like to read, all that kind of stuff. So I just picked up a lot of stuff along the way. But when we talk about access, I mean, like, what do we really mean by that word access in the like hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation? What do we mean by that? And that really just comes down to like an opportunity and a place to go do that hunt or fishing or trapping or running hounds or whatever it is that you want to do. But it's just an opportunity to engage in the world in those ways, and a place to do that in. And that's really, if there's a problem in Kansas, it's not the outdoor resources, it's gaining access to those outdoor resources. And so that's really the problem. And a further refinement on that a little bit is, it's kind of difficult sometimes to say and hear. If you're a rich person, if you're really wealthy, like really wealthy, you don't have access problems. You know, you can get access to anything you want because you can write a nice big check and you can get into any place, you can go any place, you can do anything you want to do. But that threshold for what's considered rich in the outdoor world is in the process of changing, I believe. And that number is going to go up pretty substantially. And I think that's in the not too distant future. I'm not trying to set off any alarm bells, or maybe I am, but I just think that's coming soon. I think it's going to be harder and harder and harder, and there's going to be fewer and fewer and fewer people that are going to have access to our outdoor resources unless we change some stuff. We were talking earlier about going, having fun hunting trips and going places. I hope that continues, and I hope it's accessible to a lot of people. I think that threshold is going to get higher and higher. And so it's the people who are not real wealthy and can't go buy, 200 acres or whatever out, to go hunting on, but can't go to here, there, wherever. It's those people that really have problems with access in the state of Kansas. If you're in the top 1%, you're making $1 million a year, every year, you don't have access problems. You just don't. You can do whatever you want. But if you are substantially less than that, and as you go down further down the numerical order there, your problems increase and increase and increase. And we need to get everybody out, in my humble opinion. The more we get out, the more people we get outdoors in more quality situations, the better the world's going to be. Is my humble opinion. I think if you look back, like you're a religious person, when Jesus had problems, what did he do? He went to the mountain, or he went to the garden, or he went someplace and he got away from people. And he went out and got in nature. If you're a philosopher, same kind of thing happens all the time in the philosophical world. If you look at movies, you think about like a lot of movies or a lot of books or whatever, a lot of times there's a person, they have a problem and they go away for a while and they struggle and they do all kinds of stuff, and then they come back and they're victorious, and yay, it's a great movie. But so there's that part about getting away from people, having a place to go. That's what we're really talking about. And so if that's what we're talking about, there's really like two ways, two kinds of places that you can go for access to all these wonderful outdoor resources that we're talking about in Kansas. We've got public land that you can go to, that everybody can go to, or there's private land that has public access, one of the two. And then if we talk about public lands, in Kansas, we are pretty starved for public lands in the big scheme of things. But if you break it down a little bit, like what is public land? What's that mean? And we all know, like a state park, that's kind of public lands. A city park, that's public lands. But if you think about it, it's like the word public is like an indicator of ownership. Like, who owns that land? It's the public's land. And who's the public? It's like, we are. It's ours. You can say, oh, but that's the city's park. And well, who makes up the city? Like in America, we do. We're the government, we're the owners. And so we own that, whether it's a city park, county park, state park, national park, whatever it may be. Like in America, we're the government. We are the ones that elect the people that are supposed to appoint people to run that and all that kind of stuff. It's up to us to take care of all of that stuff. It's the public's land, and we're the public, and it's upon us to take care of it. And so like when Steve and I are out, doing the work on the cutting trees or whatever, we're trying to preserve, maintain all that kind of stuff, our public land that we have. And, going again, like I was talking about, I like to go out, like even when I was a kid, And you're worried about breaking some rules earlier. I'll tell you, I'm going to confession right here. I was super lucky as a kid. I grew up in a real small town, went to a real small church. And I was incredibly lucky because when I was 14 years old, there was 1 year that we got a youth pastor at our church, 1 year. And it was when I was 14 years old. I'll never forget this. And that guy liked to go backpacking. And lucky for me, he organized a backpacking trip to the mountains. And I immediately signed up for it and went on that backpacking trip, and it changed my life. I mean, absolutely changed my life. And I don't remember that guy's name. I wish I did. I'd love to sit down and talk about it with him. I'm sure he remembers it. You'll hear why. But it was pretty interesting. Well, there's a familiar face walking in. And so when I was 14 years old, I get to go on this church backpacking trip to the mountains. And that's all I knew was that we were going to the mountains. That's all I cared about. I just want to go to the mountains and live there for a few days. And so we went. It was guys, girls, church trip, all that good stuff. And we get up there, and we made it about 2 miles in and got hit by what at that time I thought was like the sky was falling hailstorm. You know, I just thought it was awful. I thought it was terrible. Things went poorly from that point forward. We got cold, got wet. One of the girls got hypothermia. I mean, it was bad. It was going downhill quickly. And we ended up struggling on up. We were going to go 4 miles in. We ended up making it in the 4 miles, set up camp. Everybody was tired. Everybody's cold. Nobody was happy. It was awful. A bunch of teenage kids just pissed at the world, you know. And so we stayed up there that night. It was supposed to be a 3-day trip. It got condensed to a 2-day trip because we marched in one day and marched our happy butts right back out the next day. Everybody thought it was horrible and terrible. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was great. I couldn't wait to get back. And everybody else thought it was terrible. And I was just like, this is awesome. And so fast forward a year then, getting to the law-breaking part. I was 15 years old now. Still didn't have a driver's license, but I was a big kid in a small town. Nobody thought anything about it. I'd been driving for 2 or 3 years. Everybody's driving around anyway. It didn't matter. But so when I was 15 years old, no driver's license, different time. My folks, I was like, I want to go to the mountains for the weekend. I convinced my dad, and off I went to the mountains. And started solo backpacking. So then when I was 15 years old, didn't have anybody with me. There wasn't any church groups or nothing. I just, you know, young, bulletproof, invincible 15-year-old. I can do this, whatever. I'll figure it out. And did it, and been doing that ever since, and just love it. But to tie in with all of that is in my brain, my teenage brain, I was just going to the mountains. I didn't know where I was going. I was just going to the mountains. I knew I could go out there and walk around. Everybody left me alone. And what I didn't realize is that I was going to a national forest. I had no idea. I just thought I was going to the mountains. Ends up, I was going to a national forest, San Isabel National Forest in Colorado, and had a great time. Made many, many trips there. It's now, I'm happy to say, I didn't know this distinction at that time at all. It has now become a wilderness area because the biggest pain in my butt on that trail that I used a lot was motorcycles going up it. You'd hear them coming forever, you'd hear them going forever, and there'd be motorcycles going up and down this backpacking trail. It's now a wilderness area. You can't do that. I'm happy about that because I like to walk. So anyway, but I was going to a national forest. I didn't realize it, but there was a place where I could go and I could engage with the world in a pretty intimate way, and had some amazing encounters. Changed me from a skinny, scrawny, little scared teenager to somebody that had some confidence. It helped me tremendously, and I've never forgotten that. And I feel like everything I do is like, I'm just trying to pay that stuff back. All the great experiences, we're talking about the fair experiences we've had and all that kind of stuff, all those experiences, like anything that I can do to get people out there is just like trying to pay it back a little bit. Because it just made a huge difference to me. But that was a national park. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm part owner of that. It's like everybody in this room, everybody watching this is a part owner of that national forest. We own that. And when you own stuff, you take care of it. You don't trash it. You know, you see somebody else trashing it, take care of business that way too. You know, and so when you go into it with that frame of mind, and you apply that, like even to the county fishing lake, you know, the city park, whatever, it's like, we own this. Why the hell are we not taking care of this? You know, why are we? I'm a fisherman. Why are we as fishermen the trashiest people in the world? Why are we always leaving worm buckets every place we go? You know, I don't understand that. It's ours. Why do we want to create a place that looks like that? Pick up after yourself. You know, I don't understand why we don't do that, but it is ours. It belongs to the public. It's ours. And if you want to kind of get down into it, like I have a legal background, so I think that in those terms sometimes. But really what happens is that land, and actually this goes for the wildlife as well, they are held in trust for us. We own them. We're like a person that has a trust. We own the property that's in that trust. But we hire trustees to run it, manage it, take care of it for us. And then we're the beneficiaries of that trust. So there's trust property that's like public lands, public wildlife, all that kind of stuff. And then we own it, but we want somebody else to manage it that knows what the heck they're doing with it, which is great. We need that. And so we hire those people, and the government officials that appoint those people responsible to us as well. And we need to take care of that. And that's our public land situation. We're the beneficiaries of that, but there's people that's supposed to be taking care of it for us. That applies to public lands. And actually in America, all of the wildlife is publicly owned. It is an absolute legal truth since 1842 was the first time that there was a Supreme Court decision that determined that. And that was different. There was a lot of things when America was founded, there was a lot of things that was different from Europe. That's what we were trying to do when we left Europe and came to America and made this country. We were trying to do things different. It's one of the things we did different. It was fantastic. It was the king, you know, we always think of Robin Hood, king's deer, all that kind of stuff. That's the European model. The king owns the deer, not the people. He could keep people from shooting his deer. In America, those deer belong to us. And the same kind of thing. We own them. Game managers take care of them. State wildlife and parks agencies take care of them. But we're the beneficiaries of that. We get to go out and hunt if we follow the rules. And so that's kind of like some basics of public land and public wildlife, kind of just basic understanding kind of stuff. But in some information for you, in America, 28% of our country is owned by us as the federal government, by the federal government. 28%, which is a pretty good chunk. You know, it really is. 28% of it is owned by the federal government, which is us. And I'm pretty proud of that. That's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, that is not spread out evenly across America. You know, Alaska and Nevada are primarily publicly owned states. And they're top two states in percentage of public lands. They have a ton. And then you start going down all the states. It's like scrolling on your phone. You're going down, going down, going down. You get down to 49, 50, like the bottom of the barrel. That's Kansas. That's Kansas. We have, by percentage, either the least or next to least amount of public land in America. And that's just the way it is. We have great agricultural land here. That's what our calling card is in Kansas. We have great agricultural abilities. We can feed the world from here, and we do it. And that's fantastic. Flip side of that is everything is privately owned so that it can be farmed. And that leaves nothing for public usage. And so that's just the way that is. I'm not saying it's a bad thing because agriculture runs our state. It pays a lot of bills, man. And so it is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that at all, but there is a flip side to the whole situation. You know, if you look at Kansas, if you look at the federal lands that we have here, like we're up right now, we're sitting here in the northeast corner of the state. You go to the polar opposite, southwest corner, there's about 100,000 acres out there in the Cimarron National Grassland. And that's land that the federal government bought back from farmers who went broke in the Dust Bowl. And that's how that land was acquired. If you look down there, man, it's a patchwork. And that's why. It's because they were buying back farms from people who had homesteaded and not made it. And so that's how that became owned by the federal government. It wasn't some big scheme. They were buying back farms that had failed. But that's our biggest chunk of federal land. And it's gorgeous. I've hunted down there a fair amount. It's great. It's a long ways from any population center. You know, it just really is. It's just a long ways away. In some ways that's great, in some ways it's not. But that's the biggest chunk of federal land that we have. It's clear down in the southwest corner. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a couple of wildlife refuges. They got about 25,000 acres. And then the National Park Service has got about 400. And I'm pretty sure that's like part of the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve out by Strong City, Council Grove, that area up there. So we really don't have much in the way of federal public lands. So maybe there's some state lands that we can go to. Kind of same story. We've got some state parks. Most of them are state fishing lakes. You guys have here is a great little fishing lake. And then generally speaking, there's like a floodplain around the water that is the public hunting area. And that's about it. That is primarily our public hunting land, or state owned in Kansas. There's a few of them here and there, kind of scattered around. They're not that way, but most of the state owned public land hunting areas in Kansas are the floodplains around reservoirs and big and small, I guess is the way to say that. Parks, you know, smaller fishing lakes, and then the big reservoirs. And that's really our state hunting areas. So there's not much there either. I'm giving you all kinds of great news, aren't I? But there's another way that some states have a lot of publicly owned state areas that you can hunt. When states were coming into the United States, folks back east would say, well, we don't want a bunch of dummies out there. Let's make sure that we have some funding for their education. And so every time they opened up a new area, they would set aside sections of ground that were owned by the state, that were to be used for the production of income to fund education. And so the federal government was trying to increase, you know, the educational opportunities as the frontier was being opened, all that kind of stuff. Most of the states from Kansas and west have that. Most of the states have a fair amount of that. A lot of that is opened up to hunting, oddly enough these days. Kansas, we don't have that. The folks that Kansans elected and sent to the legislature decided a couple of times that we needed to sell that and use that money for education. And so instead of it producing the income over the years, they sold it, and then guess what? That money kind of got used for stuff. So we don't have any of those state trust lands here in Kansas. It's kind of the third verse of the same song. We don't have any. And so it's kind of the next deal. And so if you look at it, you think about it that way, it's like, well, what, I mean, surely our legislature now is like trying to take care of us. You know, there's a fair number of hunters, anglers, trappers, houndsmen. There's a fair number of us here in Kansas. surely the legislature's taking care of us and they're going to get us some more stuff, right? No, it is in fact the opposite situation. The legislature has passed laws to make it next to impossible to add more public lands to hunting. There is a law in the books that says that if there is a parcel of land that the Wildlife and Parks wants to buy, and there's a willing seller that wants to sell it to them, they can't do that if it's over 160 acres unless it goes through the legislature. The way I always say that, it takes an act of Congress for Wildlife and Parks to buy more than 160 acres of ground at a time. So they're really, and to get that through, I can tell you, I am aware of several pieces of ground that are owned by farmers. Those farmers want to sell it to the state, to Wildlife and Parks. Various situations. One is, two of them are adjacent to wildlife areas, and they enjoy people coming out and hunting, and they want their land to be part of the public hunting area. And it's right there by it. And it's more than 160 acres. And it can't get through the legislature. There's a farmer that wants to sell his land to this party over here. This party happens to be Wildlife and Parks. That farmer wants to sell his land to Wildlife and Parks, and he cannot unless it goes through the legislature and gets approved there by the House, the Senate, and signed by the governor. Yeah,
that's
question.
just so crazy. I gotta ask you.
Sure.
I guess there was some debate during the legislative process. What was going through their minds on it?
And I know some of the history. I'm not an expert on that history. I know it used to be 320. So there was, and then some folks got mad and cut it in half. And I don't remember the particulars. There was an issue down in the mined lands area down the southeast corner. I want to say, I can't remember. But there is a strong sentiment. I'll say it that way. There's a strong sentiment among a lot of people, a lot of agricultural people in particular, that the state should not own property, or not much. And that's a very strong sentiment in Kansas. I disagree with it, obviously. I've seen the benefits of it, but that's a strong sentiment here. It's hard. There was about 4 or 5 years ago, we did get a parcel purchased in the Byron Walker wildlife area down by Kingman, about 400 acres down there. We got that added. You would have thought it was World War III getting that thing through. And now there is no appetite in the legislature to try it again. Like I said, there are parcels waiting.
Is there a feeling that the state's outbidding private buyers or something?
There's several things that kind of come up like routinely that you hear a lot of. One of them is they don't pay taxes on it. And that's not true. They don't specifically pay taxes. They pay the state, Wildlife and Parks makes what is called payments in lieu of taxes. It's the same amount on the bottom line. It's the same thing. It just goes into a different category. And so that's one thing, is they think that the counties are getting stiffed and not getting their tax money. Not true. They also think that they don't farm it correctly. What they hopefully should understand at some point in time is that there's different farming goals. Farmers, by and large, want to make money. Like we all want to make money in business, right? That's their business. They want to make money. It's American way. That's great. But they want to capitalize as much as they can and grow as much as they can, make as much money as they can. Wildlife and Parks is going to have a different goal. They're doing it for wildlife habitat. It's going to look a little different. That's right. The great part of it is, if they slow down and look at it, there's usually a young kid that's farming it, that's trying to get going in the farming area. And they'll lease it to that young kid, probably get a pretty good deal on it because he's getting his foot in the door. And so it works out pretty well in that respect. It's helped. A lot of times they use a young farmer to farm it. And that's kind of the big things that they usually say. There's also a little undercurrent of, oh my God, the state's coming for all of our farms, which is ridiculous.
First of all, I want to welcome Representative Lance Neely to the meeting. We appreciate you coming here.
I thought that
And
was
would you
you.
like to say anything to that?
Well, as the vice chair of agriculture, I've heard a lot about this.
Yeah, I know.
A lot.
And before you even go further, I want to thank you for all that you have done. Because you have done a great deal for us, and I greatly appreciate it.
Your story is a lot like my story. I got let off at the pond or at the lake and stuff that way, and my parents would pick me up in the morning and take me home to clean fish and stuff that way, and I did that since I was fourth grader.
Yeah.
And but I appreciate what you're saying and stuff that way. You know, from what I hear and everything, it's a lot more complicated. I was not in the legislature when they changed it, everything as far as what they're buying and everything, but one of the things is, and everything is that wildlife parks don't have the money. They don't have the money to buy that, and that's why they have to go through the legislature. I mean, for them to turn around and purchase that large of a parcel of land and everything, they about have to go through the legislature to get the money to do so. And then the other thing that I would say and everything is that when they purchase these parcels of land, you're correct in that the farmers are not happy. One of the big things is the cedar infestation and stuff that way when things are let go, and then it spreads to other agricultural entities and things that way. So there's a lot of intricacies involved, but I wholeheartedly agree with you on the land. I think we only have like 3% and everything when it comes to federal land with wetlands and stuff. And, it hasn't helped. Cheyenne Bottoms has been dry for 2.5 years. And so I'm hoping that they're getting a long time before that. Yeah, I'm hoping they're getting poured on every time it rains and everything. So,
I live in Wichita, man. We keep hoping the Cheney Reservoir is getting filled up, and
I've
it's
been
like,
watching, I get an email every time it goes up and everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
Came up earlier.
it did. Yeah, we got some great rains.
I'm originally from Hutchinson, so Cheney Reservoir, the Ninsky is a lot of the places that I've been.
Yep. Well, I thought that was you. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure. We're going to talk about you guys some more.
You go right.
But I do appreciate you coming, and in all sincerity, you do a great job, and we do appreciate that. We really do. And I know there's some other efforts that you're engaged in, and we're going to mention those briefly here in a little bit. So I do appreciate you being here.
2 questions. First, if a conservation land trust had the money, could they be eligible to buy such lands? I don't know if they were restricted or not.
So a lot of times what happens right now is one of the large national organizations, like if there's a farmer that wants to sell his land to the state, it won't go anywhere. A lot of times, thankfully, like Ducks Unlimited or Pheasants Forever will come in and buy that land and basically kind of hold it so that it can hopefully work through the legislative process. That happens a fair amount. And the good news out of that part, we're going to talk about walk-in hunting areas here in a minute. A lot of times that land does get opened up to the public when that happens through PF or DU.
And in that case, they would still pay taxes at the ag rate, I would presume.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
And I'm not tax dude. I'm not sure about that. But
Yeah, because Leavenworth, the county folks are interested in the tax situation. So
Right.
pilot has been mentioned, which was a Bureau of Land Management technique, like Wyoming, which is
Right.
So much in some counties, like 90%
Mhm.
federal land, so they use that. But there's not a state version of that, is there?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Okay.
yet. That's later in my talk.
Thanks.
But so our legislature has made it difficult, as we've just talked about, to gain additional public lands. Nobody has an interest in that. Nobody has an appetite for it, is the way I heard it. I hear it described a lot. It's just too much of a hassle for, like we did down at Byron Walker. We got 400 and some odd acres. And while that was an incredibly important 400 acres, it opened up a whole bunch of duck hunting and deer. I mean, it was like gave folks another access point is what it really did to a great area. And so that one was pretty key. That one was pretty key, but there's others around that are equally as key, I would say. And I still, like me, I have a hard time getting past a farmer not being able to sell his land to who he wants to. To me, that seems like un-American. It just does. It's like the taking of a property right to some degree. To tell someone who they can and can't sell their property to. I struggle with that. Steve, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna go off on a little different tangent if I'm on.
Sure.
I kind of warned you about this. The state of Kansas seems to be well behind the state of Missouri when it comes to invasive plants like Bradford pears, where we were talking about cedars, and the state bird of Kansas is eastern meadowlark. In southeast Kansas, even in western Kansas, or in southeast Kansas, is quail hunting. In western Kansas, we have some prairie chicken and a lot of pheasants. What we have in Leavenworth County is not a lot, but the state of Missouri is starting to talk about fescue is bad. It's bad for cattle, it's bad for deer, and it's prohibitive of ground nesting birds reproducing and maintaining the, I don't know, what we like to go chase. Okay, and I not everybody heard me say this earlier. The state of Kansas raised $10 million in out-of-state hunting fees. As the administrator for Kansas Outdoor Heritage Alliance, is there anything we can do?
You want me to skip ahead a couple pages? I talked to, it feels like we really ought to do that right now.
Okay, is there anything we could do?
Let's do that.
To keep land developments, subdivisions coming in and putting in an invasive grass like fescue that's going to spread to places where ranchers are trying to feed their cattle, shepherds are trying to raise their sheep or goats or whatever. Is there anything we could do at the state or county level to stop that?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. We're going to talk about that.
I'm sorry I jumped ahead.
No, I share your frustrations. I hear it a lot. We do a lot of stuff. For those of you that don't know, on the BHAs, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, we do a ton of service projects. We're not the organization like DUPF that has a whole bunch of cash. We don't have that. That's not what we do. What we do is we're kind of like the flip side of most conservation groups. Most conservation groups are kind of older folks, maybe have some money. That's kind of a lot of that membership. We have a lot of young guys. I'm a dinosaur. In BHA, I am a 100% dinosaur. In a few weeks, I'm going to be turning 66. And I am an absolute dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur in BHA. 75% of our membership is 45 or younger. And the point of that is we have young guys love nothing more than to get out with a chainsaw and cut down a bunch of cedar trees that are problems. That's a great day for them. I mean, it just makes their whole month if they get to go out and cut down a bunch of cedar trees that are invasive. And so that's, now I've totally lost I see I'm 66 years old, damn it, I forgot where I was at, right?
Me too.
But there's a lot of stuff that can be done. BHA is out there, we're doing our part. I did lose totally what I was talking about.
Stop suburbs.
Stop. So there we go. Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, the eastern red cedars are horribly invasive right now. And Representative Neal, you were talking about how there's, some people feel that that's a real problem. I hunt a lot, like it's what I do. So I see a lot, and every time I hear that in my brain, I go, I can show you 50 privately owned places that are worse than that one wildlife park. But I understand that that's the perception. I totally understand it. And in a couple of cases, it's very well warranted. There's a couple of places that are out of control. And I don't dispute that a bit. But eastern red cedars are a big problem, a big problem. Fescue is a problem. Bradford pear trees, we're seeing that, and the calorie pear trees are now becoming a big problem. One of the things to talk about in Missouri, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, they have what's called a state conservation fund that gets paid for by a sales tax. That's the way they fund it there. Their state, I'm involved in an effort to get a state conservation fund here. We had one of their people come and talk to us last year about how it all happened and came about. Their funding mechanism is like, they have two sales tax. One is a 1/10 of 1% sales tax. And another one is a 1/8 of 1% sales tax. Those two little tiny things that nobody ever feels or sees gives them so much money that they can't spend all of the money in their state conservation fund. And what we're trying to do here is get a state conservation fund. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but that does a lot of education. Education is a huge part of what we're trying to do with that one. And so it comes back to what, Missouri is a little bit ahead of us. That state conservation fund, they started that like, I want to say 15 or 20 years ago. And so we are way behind on that. And so that's one of the things that you're asking, what can we do? That's one of the things that we can do is get behind that effort and try to get that ball rolling. Because that made a huge difference in Missouri. That changed so many things. And so if we can get something like that going here in Kansas, that would be one of the things that we can do when you're talking about all of the invasive stuff. And just educate. I know one of the things that you guys work on here is like the fragmentation of land, like breaking it up into 5 acres or whatever. And that's a big concern of yours here. That's a big part of where that education component could help. Telling people what they're doing. A lot of people don't know. People are good, basically. They may not know what the hell they're doing. Lord knows I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. But people in general are pretty good. And if you tell them, hey, this is a bad thing, they'll probably stop. They may not like it, and they may yell at you back for a little while, but eventually they're probably going to come around to it. So that's to answer your question, and we'll get back to that more here in a little bit. So we've been talking about public lands and how we're kind of up against it. I'm going to be up against time here for a little. But how we're kind of up against it in Kansas with public lands because we just don't have much at all. What we do have some of, however, is private lands that are opened up to public access. And that's one of the biggest things and best things that we've got in Kansas. We have the walk-in hunter access program, WIHA, W-I-H-A. I hunt, like I said, I hunt a ton. That is pretty much exclusively what I hunt. Everybody badmouths WIHA land. Oh, there's nothing out there. Oh, there's nothing out there. That's a load. That's a load of telling. There's good hunting out there. Do you have to work for it? Hell yes. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Those two guys who want to sell their land to the state, or they open theirs up to WIHA?
I think the one down at Byron Walker that we got in, I think DU owned that and it was open. It was in the walk-in hunting program. There's one up by up in Jewell County right now. I believe. I think that one is. I'm not sure. I can't remember for sure.
You said that there want to be, they like
Yeah.
people to hunt.
Yeah, a lot of them.
That'll be something, that'll be pressed on that.
Yep, and that's something else that we've worked on a lot, is opening up places like that. But yeah, most of the time when PF or DU opens those up, if they can, or when they buy them, they open them up when they can. They do. So there's a lot of them that are already publicly accessible, but like PF or DU needs that money. They've got, a couple $1 million or whatever sunk into that. If they need a couple $1 million for something else, they may have to sell that ground. And it may not be opening. So we do have the WIHA program. I don't know how many of you are familiar with. Does everybody kind of understand that a little bit? All right, so it's a place where like you can get your map or on your phone or whatever, and you can find these properties. You don't have to ask permission. You don't have to knock on a door. You don't have to do anything. It's right there. You can hunt it. There's some rules you got to follow, which makes sense. Don't drive around. Don't do this. Don't do that. They all make sense. It's a great program. Kansas was one of the first ones that really jumped hard into that and was a national leader for a long time. We've kind of been, there's some other states that do a really, really good job now too. Kansas is not alone in that anymore, but we've got a little over 1 million acres enrolled in walk-in hunting program. That basically comes down to funding for that, partially comes out of some farm bill stuff. There's a program called VPA, Voluntary Public Access, and that's kind of through the farm bill, and that's how the money kind of comes down, and we get the opportunity to hunt those lands. They do get used a lot, especially the front edges of them. If you hunt right by the road, there's not going to be anything there because that's where everybody gets out and kicks their dog out, and they walk right beside the road, and then they get in at the other end and drive off because that there's no game there. If you get off your butt and walk a little bit, work at it a little bit, there are some fine places to hunt. There are truly some fine places. I hear in objections that people have or problems that people have with walk-in. I mean, if you got 1 million acres, there's going to be some personal interaction with some people. Anytime there's interactions between people, there's going to be some problems occasionally. I can tell you, I like I said, I hunt a lot, and I have never had a problem with a farmer, a rancher. I've had a couple of problems with other hunters doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So we got that straightened out, and then we all went on our merry little way. That's the walk-in hunting system is great. It's 1 million acres. I'll also tell you that there is not 1 million acres of great hunting out there. And the walk-in folks will tell you that too, because they sign those properties up, hopefully 5 to 10 years at a time. You understand crop rotation, succession of plantings, all of that kind of stuff. It's not all great all at the same time. There's going to be fallow fields. There's going to be bare fields. There's going to be stubble fields. There's going to be grass that's tall, that's cut to the ground. There's going to be everything out there. It is not 1 million acres of great hunting. There are some great hunting spots out there, but it's not 1 million acres of great hunting.
Not at one time.
Not at one time. Over the years, yeah, as everything cycles through, this is going to be, this is going to be corn next to this grass this year. It's not going to be corn next year, and so it just cycles through like that. And so it's a great program. When I've been in the legislature before, one of the things that I've heard was, well, what happened to knocking on doors? Why can't you just go knock on somebody's door and ask for permission? I remember when you did that. I remember before that when you really didn't need to do that. I'm that old. If it looked like it was a good hunting spot, generally speaking, nobody really cared. There wasn't that many hunters around, and so you just hunted where you wanted to go, and it wasn't a problem. And I'm sure I would have at some point run across the wrong person at the wrong time, but I never did. Hopefully I was a little respectful about the way I did things and didn't get too close to houses and all that kind of stuff. But so I remember all of that stuff. The problem is, or the situation, I should say, I'm trying to get the word problem out of my vocabulary. The situation is there is a huge amount of Kansas that is now leased up by people for hunting purposes. What that means is that there's farmer or rancher or whatever, and I'm talking in very general terms here. There's a farmer or rancher out there. Somebody approaches them and says, hey, I'll pay you $10,000, $5,000, whatever it is, if you allow us only to hunt land. And so if the farmer agrees, nobody else gets to hunt that land except for the people that paid for that lease. It's called a hunting lease. You get the rights to hunt that ground. And you might think that that's not a real widespread situation. There are several organizations that do that. There's one that will give you a number. I don't know how much longer they're going to keep doing it, but there's one that will give you a number and tell you how much they've got leased up. And that number is 12.8 million acres. 12.8 million, that's one organization. 12.8 million. But that, remember, we just talked about walk-in hunting and how it's a great thing, it's wonderful. That was 1 million. To serve all the rest of us who can't afford those leases, who can't pay for a guide or an outfitter. And that's a little depressing, and that's a little hard. And that's just part of it. Sean?
The other thing that's problematic for a lot of people to just go knock on doors is lots and lots of Western Kansas are tied up in just trusts. And there is no door to knock on.
Right.
Those people abandon those farms. They still have somebody farming it for them. They moved back east. And there is no door to knock on.
Yeah.
Contiguous anymore either.
Even some that are big contiguous.
Yep.
Bits of ground, there's no way of getting a hold of the person that has that ground tied up. Might not even be in a hunting place. It's just sitting out there really doing nothing. Other than the person that farms it usually has some people that he'll allow to hunt it, but you might never find out who it is that's farming that ground. I mean, we've got somebody that farms our ground in Dodge, and before I said something, there are a number of people hunted on that ground.
Yeah.
And I said, I think we need to rethink this.
That's, Sean, you're on to my number 2. Leases was number 1. Corporate and few owners is number 2. We're tracking here, bud. But that is the truth, man. You go out there and drive around and look at stuff. There's not as many houses as there used to be. There's just not. It's like there's a lot of corporate ownership. You know, you don't need as many people to run farms as you used to. The size of farms continues to go up as they get absorbed into bigger and bigger and bigger ones. Yeah, there's not doors to knock on in a lot of cases.
Back in this end of the state, it's a small tracts of land. It's all either leased up, somebody's already on it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
You can knock on every door you want to, they'll all say,
Yeah.
"You've already got me."
Yeah. And so, and the third thing that I have down is societal changes that make it hard to knock on doors. As a kid, I remember my mom dressing up on Sunday because somebody might come over. And it was a good thing, you know, it was a great thing because somebody might come over. And so she'd get, you know, we'd go to church and she'd stay in her nice stuff or whatever, because somebody might come over. She'd have a cake or something sitting around. Somebody might come over. Well, now ask yourselves this: when somebody knocks on your door, what do you think?
Yes.
It's UPS. What is this guy trying to sell me?
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Or do I need to grab my gun? You know, that's, I mean, I'm guilty of that. That's the thoughts. It's not like, oh, good, somebody's coming to see me. I don't think that. I don't know very many people that do. And then if it's a stranger out there that you don't happen to know, then where's your mind going? And it's like, yeah, I better get my gun. And that gets the whole conversation about, hey, can I hunt your ground? Off to kind of a rocky start. And it's not anything, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, any group, anything. It's just society. I think that's just a societal change that we've gone to. We don't get dressed up and bake a cake because somebody might come by anymore. We don't do that. That doesn't happen. And it's always a tense enough situation when you're not sure who you're talking to, and do you own this land, and all those conversations. I've had a million of those. All it takes is a little rough edge right at the first, and that's hard to overcome.
They don't even know our neighbor.
Yeah.
That's like.
So that's the 3 big things. When I hear that about, well, can't you go knock on doors? It's like big chunks of it's leased up already. Other big chunks you can't find the owner of because it's owned by some conglomeration in Chicago.
Then you go back to your kid, you just go out and hunt.
Maybe that's the answer. I don't think so.
You're one that's done that.
So anyway, so that's the walk-in hunter access program. That's private lands in Kansas that are opened up for public access. And so thank God there is folks that want to do that. There's another organization that, and I'm going to get to Koha in a minute, the Kansas Outdoor Heritage Alliance. There's a group in Koha now. It's called Hunters for Access, Kansas Hunters for Access. And they do a great job. Their sole purpose in life is to show landowners who are in walk-in hunting appreciation and let them know that we appreciate that. That's their soul. They're going to try to raise money. They're not trying to do anything. They just want to keep the walk-in hunter access program going. And so God bless the hunters that enroll in that. They could probably get more money through leases. I've been to a couple of the dinners that the Hunters for Access have, and a lot of those hunters, and I again, I say it all the time, and God bless those folks. And I mean that sincerely, because they see it as like a civic obligation that they do, that they perform. They could make more money, and they choose not to, so that more people can hunt their land. And so thank God they're there. And so I appreciate them. So after all this great news, it sounds depressing, I know, but there is hope. There is hope. There really is. The great news is that hunters and anglers have been in tough situations before. We really have been. We have been in worse situations than this and come out smelling pretty good. Everybody likes to talk about, oh man, you wish you were back in the old days, you know, being able to hunt back in the good old days, the Wild West days. Well, about 1900, the year 1900, if you had been in Kansas, there were no deer.
60.
Yeah. There were few in 60. In 1900, there were no deer. There were no antelope, like there is out west now. There was no anything. Wildlife had pretty much been erased. And we always like to think that we have that romantic idea in our, that in our head. Oh, we wish we could go back in time. Oh man, it must have been great then. Well, the truth is not that pretty.
Like jackrabbits, so.
There were some, but I'd say that, and it's not a bad reason. People were feeding their families at that point off the land. And there were markets for the meat. And so all of that kind of came together, and in most places, there were no deer, there were no antelope, there was very few of anything, really. And it's the same way across a good chunk of America, that's the way it is. Luckily, there were some folks that came along at that point in time, started some actions happening, and we ended up going from nothing in the 1900 era. 1930s, it got bad enough. We've got the Depression going on, we got the Dust Bowl going on, and we still had the leadership at that point in time to say, hey, wait a minute, we as hunters, we need to fix this. We created a problem. We need to fix it. And we did. And at that point, in the middle, I always love this, in the middle of the Depression, hunters decided to pay more taxes. There was an act that made it through Congress, and it created the Pittman-Robertson Act, PR. That's what it's referred to. It's an excise tax on every gun, every round of ammo, everything that you do in hunting. There was a little excise tax that was put on that, and that funded wildlife restoration across the country. And it's still going on today, and it's still a great program. You're asking, Steve brought up, what can you do? What can we do now? What is there that we can do? Even if you don't hunt, even if you don't fish, even if you don't like ducks, buy a hunting license, buy a fishing license, and buy a duck stand. If you want to help out, do those things. If you want to help conservation, buy a hunting license, buy a fishing license, and buy a duck stand. If you do those three things, that money that you give to the state gets multiplied for years. And every year that you do that continues that forward. If you're a bird watcher, I tell every bird watcher I meet, you buy a hunting license, you should. You damn well should. I don't care if you don't shoot a bird. If you like birds around, buy a hunting license.
Not about the conservation fund. You can kind of steer away from that, but
Not yet.
the importance of that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get there. But so that's one of the things that hunters did. I'm telling you, we've been in tighter spots. If we suck it up and get after it ourselves, we can fix this. We can. We fixed worse situations, and we can fix this one. One of the things that developed out of the early 1900s was called the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. And that model is the most successful wildlife conservation program that has ever been in the world, because we had decimated just about everything. Now we've got an abundance of deer. Our legislators get to hear about how there's too many deer. And so we've come back a long way, but the North American model of wildlife conservation came around about that same time, started up that same time. It was not and is not a static set of rules that changes. But basically what that says is that the wildlife is publicly owned. It's an acknowledgement of that from the 1842 Supreme Court case. That model also tells us that a state agency is the best one to manage that wildlife, to set the regs to do it. There's supposed to be a commission that's involved in that process to help set the regulations themselves. There's no market hunting anymore. Like if you go to a restaurant and, oh, look, they've got wild buffalo steaks. No, that's a buffalo from a farm. It's not a wild animal. You can't sell a dead wild animal. And so the stuff that you eat in a hotel or in a restaurant or that you buy at the store, it's not actual wild game. It's stuff. It's a deer that's been raised on a farm. It's a deer. And so there's all of that stuff. The North American model is still in effect. It's still being followed, hopefully, today. It is a great thing. It is the scientific, and one of the main things, I guess I forgot this, one of the main things is when that commission and when that Wildlife and Parks Agency is supposed to be running things, they're supposed to base their decisions on science, not on who can make the most money, not on what guide or outfitter can do this or that. It's supposed to be based on science and what's best for, I don't like this term, but I can't come up with a better one, the resource, which is wildlife. That's supposed to be the guiding principle, is what's best for the wildlife. How can we hunt them? How can we raise it? All that kind of stuff, but that's supposed to be the guiding principle, is science for that. So here we are. What do? Like I said, we buy a hunting license, buy a fishing license, and buy a duck stand. That's the best thing, one of the best things that you can do right now if you want to help conservation. Buy those things right there. Also, there are a lot of great conservation organizations out there. Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever does a great job. Ducks Unlimited does a great job. Backcountry Hunters and Anglers does a great job. And we all do different things. One of the things that we've really been successful at, and I'm very proud of, is the Nature Conservancy has always had like a little bit of a stigma with the hunting world because they wouldn't open up their properties to hunting. There's always been a little bit of a about that. A few years ago, I started nagging the TNC folks in Kansas. I knew that there was two of them that were hunters, and TNC is one of the largest landowners in the state of Kansas, and almost all of their properties are now enrolled in the walk-in hunting access program. And so they helped us out with that. They came a long ways in that conversation, and I'm very proud, very, very happy that they did that. We'll talk about Koha in just a minute. You can't join that. I'll tell you why. But so those conservation groups that I just talked about, join one of them. Give them some of your money. They do good things. They all do good things. It takes all of us. We all do different little aspects of it. But then I want to talk about the State Conservation Fund that we've talked about a few times. I've been involved in that legislative effort for, I think, 4 years now. And I will tell you that I was not in on the ground floor in any respect. That thing was going on for about 4 years. I caught wind of it. I didn't like part of it. And as those things go, I raised a little hell about it. And they said, well, if you don't like it, why don't you come in and join us and help us with this? And so I did. And I'm still in there. I'm a member of I'm an advisor to the executive leadership team of that process. Basically, what we have tried to do, the initial thought behind the Kansas State Conservation Fund is we didn't want to raise taxes and we didn't want to create additional government layers. We didn't want to do those two things. That was like, if we're gonna get this done, like, that's kind of like where we need to start. How do we do that, and how much money do we need? And in the earlier days, we've now come down off of this pretty substantially. But in the early days, we're like, what's a number that we can ask for and clearly demonstrate a need for? And we latched on to kind of one thing and ran with that because it was way too high as it was. But every year, there are $140 million of conservation projects that farmers and ranchers want to do in Kansas, that they can't get the money to do it through government matching programs. $140 million every year. That's like a steady number for some reason. That amount is out there. And in the conservation world, generally speaking, we decided we were going to try to track that. We were going to try to keep this amount that we asked for from the legislature and say, we're not going to spend any of that unless we match it with something else. Like, there has to be a matching component of it there, because there's lots of government programs out there that you can get involved in. Well, if you can provide this amount of money, then they'll give you that amount of money. For that $140 million that I was talking about, if we had $60 million, that would fund, by the time you run that through the matching grants and all that kind of stuff, that would fund that $140 million. And we're like, that's one on paper we can prove. It's there. It's black and white. That number is there. We can prove that. So we asked for $60 million and got laughed out of the place. We kind of knew we would, but because that's a lot of money. But that's what we did. It's like, there's a black and white number we can point to right there. There's that number. If we get this amount, we can reach that amount. And there was a clearly demonstrated need. So the way we've got to work it, but that was way too much money. We knew that. We've dropped it down considerably now, with the help of some key legislators, I might add. But the way we have it set up right now, the proposal is, and we're going to bring it back to the legislature again this year. We've been there for 3 or 4 years now. We're going to try to create a fund of money. Where that money comes from is still open to debate. We're going to try to create a fund of money. Half of the money would go towards working lands, farmers, ranchers, landowners, that kind of stuff, so that they can do irrigation efficiency projects, or terracing, or whatever it may be, that they need to do for greater conservation to help out just living in Kansas, basically. And so half of it would go to that, and then we've got 2 other areas cut out. A quarter of it would go to wildlife conservation, and a quarter of it would go to parks and recreation. And that's kind of the basic format of what we're trying to do, in just very big, broad strokes. We're trying to get $15 million, maybe $20 million. And I'll tell you, some of the internal conversations we had, like in my brain, I'm like, okay, if it's $20 million, that means we're going to get, by the time we go through all the matching, we're going to get 50 or 60 million. If we can't show some benefits with 50 or 60 million dollars, we don't have any business getting it. And so that effort is going through. I've got a couple of flyers. I don't have much, but I've got a couple of things that you can pass around, look at, take home, whatever. But the state conservation fund would go a long ways towards what they have in Missouri. That deal, like I said, it's sales tax, 2 little teeny sales tax add up to piles of money, piles and piles of money. Our fund that we're trying to do, like I said, we have the three areas that we want to do it, but all 3 of those, education is a huge component of all 3 of them. Trying to talk about, here's what you can do on your land. Here's some projects that you could do, or let's do this or not. And so that state conservation fund, if we can get that through, that would be amazing. One of the ways to think about that is, like, we're kind of all familiar with the Farm Bill a little bit. There's the CRP stuff, Conservation Reserve Program, where you see a lot of grasslands and stuff like that. There's various programs like that, and there's a whole slug of them. I got invited to be in the state technical committee for Natural Resource Conservation Service, Farm Bill. folks. I get to be a voice in there. More meetings. But I was shocked at how many programs there are in the Farm Bill for helping farmers, ranchers, agricultural people accomplish things. I was shocked at them. The problem with them is they're all very like cookie cutter programs. Here's the parameters, here's the parameters, here's the parameters. If you can't fit your project into one of those parameters, you get no money. That's why the $140 million need exists. The state conservation fund that we're talking about is trying to be more flexible, more able to adapt to Kansas needs, and be more flexible so that we can work around and not be so cookie cutter, and have local folks administering those situations. So that's one thing that you can do. Contact your legislators, let them know that you favor the state conservation fund, or tell me that I'm full of it and give me some, and I'll tell you, okay, come help us change it. But that's one of the things that you can also do. There's a couple of other things we've done. One of the things that I want to talk about, BHA does a lot of legislative stuff in comparison to other groups. We take a lot of flack for it. I get lit up pretty often on social media, which is fine with me because I don't do social media, so that helps. But that we do a lot of stuff legislatively. We got very, 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 I don't want to say hurt. We got an understanding that we needed to get bigger or go home from the legislature in a couple of instances. We needed to grow up or get more people or whatever. And we didn't take that very well. And so we went back to the drawing board and started looking at how hunters and anglers and outdoor people have organized themselves in other states to get a bigger voice in the legislature. That's what we needed, was a bigger voice, because we're a bunch of little guys. Little guys don't get hurt. You know, the big dogs, they get hurt. They get hurt all the time. It's hard for the average everyday person to be hurt. And so we decided, we looked around at all of the different ways that that's happened in other states, found one that we thought would work in Kansas, and started the Kansas Outdoor Heritage Alliance. We now have 13 members. We have some of the big national groups, because I thought we need some like infrastructure. We need, like, if we really can't understand a problem, we need somebody to explain it to us. We need some knowledge, and maybe if we need money sometime, that. So we have, as member, we've got National BHA, Kansas BHA, we've got Pheasants Forever as a member, Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, National Deer Association. So those are the national groups that we have that are involved in it. But then the ones that I'm really proud of are Kansas groups that we have involved in it. Kansas BHA, got Kansas Bow Hunters Association, we got the Kansas Trappers Association, Kansas Federation of Houndsmen, Kansas Walleye Association, Flatland Fly Fishers. The ladies group, they're going to kill me. Wilderness, there we go. I can never remember the name of that. And I'm forgetting some, I'm sure. But those are, nope.
Not?
No. Friends of the Cause is not. No, that's one of the big issues that we have facing us right now. Because we have those 13 members, and we have tried really hard to like keep it focused. Like, we want the legislature to know what Kansas hunters, fishers, trappers, houndsmen, we want them to know what we think. And we've had several organizations come to us and say, wait, we want to be a member, which is great. That's really great, except it expands our focus. And we want to, and so I think what we're going to do, and Sean's involved in COHA as well. And we're trying to decide how do we do that? How do we keep our focus, but still have the support of a lot of groups? Because there's a lot of groups that want to help us. There's a lot of groups, and we're trying to figure out how do we have like supporting memberships. Well, we don't even have damn memberships now. It's just 13 folks to get together every once in a while. We don't pay dues. We don't have memberships. We don't do any of that stuff. It doesn't, we do it on Zoom and by email, so it doesn't cost anything. We're not looking to make money. We want the legislature to know what we think, and that's it. And so that's, join some of those groups that I just listed off. If you want to help us, that's the best way. Join some of those groups. Be vocal at the commission. Come to the commission meetings. We started the Kansas BHA podcast, 5 years ago. It's still going. One of the things we started doing here recently is we started doing summaries of the commission meetings. Most people think that everything's happening in the legislature. In the wildlife world, just about everything happens at the commission level. If they can't take care of it, then it gets kicked up to the legislature.
Define commission,
Do what?
define commission.
The Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commission is a board of 7 people that get appointed. It used to all be by the governor. Now it's 4 by the governor, 1 by the House, 1 by the Senate, and 1 by the Attorney General. It's a board that enacts the dates of the season, the creel limits for fishing, the kind of gun that you can use, everything that you can think of. They're the ones that passes the rules. They are the one that, and I always tell people, that's where the rubber meets the road, man. That commission, that's where stuff happens. They set all kinds of things, and they do stuff that people don't even think about as well. I mean, I knew a lot about the commission. I bitched at them a few times in the past before I started really going regularly and understanding how hard their job is. But they do all kinds of stuff. They enact the State Wildlife Action Program that oversees every species of wildlife in the state, not just game. Not just game. The sparrows, they hear every month, when they hold their meetings, they hear every month from the Sierra Club about how we need to change the rules on the ornate box turtle. They hear that all the time. And it's like they have broad impacts on the state, and people should damn sure be paying attention to them. Their meetings are available like this. You can watch it live on YouTube, or you can watch it later on YouTube. But you should pay attention to Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, KDWP.gov. Scroll down, commission, click, and just go from there, and you can watch all their meetings. They talk about everything. They had a great history. In the last one, they had a great history of how we came to have the duck zones that we do. Because there's all these squiggly lines on the maps about this is the high zone, high plains, low plains, south, all that stuff. And the guy talked about how that all happened and how the dates happened and all of that kind of stuff, so that it fits into the federal framework. And all of that was to go, commission, can we do what we've been doing? And they all go, yes. And they go on. But it was a great history. It was fascinating.
It seems odd to me. I don't go fishing nearly as much as I want to, and not like you get kind of, or have a hard time tying knots. But it seemed odd to me that they would have the same creel limit for Leavenworth County Lake, Glen Elder, Big Hill, or Perry. I mean, those lakes are very different. And to say that a fish caught in Leavenworth County needs to meet the same criteria as Perry seems odd.
What I can tell you is go back to what I talked about earlier, the North American model of wildlife conservation. That's all driven by science, by fisheries biologists. And like there was a big discussion, again, the last meeting that they had, they went from on blue cats, they introduced blue catfish here a while back. And they had a different creel limit, different slots, different everything, for like every pond in the state. And it was very confusing. And luckily, the fish population has now matured across the state. In this last meeting, they pretty much set, this is the standard across the state. And it's all based on, I don't understand it. I'm not a fisheries biologist. I don't get it.
Okay.
But according to those guys, and they can quote you verse and chapter, the reason why they do it.
But it's,
And not to say that they're that they don't try different things. They did an experiment down at Marion Reservoir a couple years ago. I forget what it was on, walleye, or I don't think it was walleye, something else. They did some slot down there that was weird from the rest of the state. And I noticed here a while back that they've kind of gotten away from that. So they try stuff.
State to state is so different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, we went to Minnesota walleye fishing and you got a smallmouth with 19.5, 28. Down here, you can't keep nothing under.
Right. And it's different
Totally
goals.
different. It's totally backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, up there, they got walleye, you know, running out the wazoo, you know, and here we're trying to keep them alive, you know, so it's a different situation. But all of that goes back to the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's all, there's supposed to be people who have been educated in these areas, that are running these programs, giving recommendations to the commission. The commission does not have to adopt what they say. They don't have to. They generally do, but not always. There's currently a big issue on night vision coyote hunting. That's a big thing right now, big issue right now. And I will say, when there was one commissioner that wanted to push it through, and maybe two, that might have been not quite right, one or two. And at first, I at the meetings, I felt like great rejection of that idea. There were some sharp words exchanged. After looking at the science of it, not everybody, but a lot of people are going, you know, I think we can do that. The question now has become, and Sean's in the middle of this part of it, the question becomes the safety part of it. How many people do you want running around out in the woods with thermal night vision, and most of them with silencers on their guns? That's the new cool thing, is thermal imaging scope and a silencer on the end of it. Try to enforce that law if you're a law enforcement person. That's tough. But then, you know, again, I go back to most people are good. Most people are going to follow the rules and not be a problem.
Library closes at 8, the parking lot stays open all night long.
But yeah, but the point of all of that is that there's stuff going on at the commission all the time. And if you really want to get down to what can you do to change things or help things, talk to your legislator. Talk to them, build a relationship with them. So don't try to contact them during the session. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Do your business with them. Do your business with them, but do it outside the session. That's where you can build a relationship with them. They understand what you're thinking. It's not when their hair is on fire in 47 different directions. Talk to them ahead of time. They have a hard job. I would never do that job.
And I'll put in a pitch for Lance here. I call him Joe Cusis and Mr. Average. And we ended up going to lunch at Hilltop. Remember that about 18 months ago. So
you're lucky. You're lucky.
Yeah.
You're lucky. I'll say that to you. You're lucky. But that's the way to do that, is talk to your legislator, develop a relationship with them, so that when they see some, you know, you get pissed off some night and do fire up some email in the middle of the session, they go, oh, wow, that's not like him. I wonder what's going on here. You know, you want that kind of response instead of like, oh, it's another wacko. Gone. Build a relationship with them. That's one thing that you can do. And that intimidates a lot of people. And I get that. It used to intimidate the hell out of me. It really did. I still have to kind of walk my way through that. But that's a great way to do it. We had one of the things that BHA was involved in recently as part of the Big Beautiful Bill. There was a part of it that involved selling off at different points. It was 500,000 acres, then it was 3 million acres, and then it was 1 million acres of our public lands that they were gonna sell off. There was a guy from Utah. It wasn't in Utah. Yeah, but it was fantastic to see the response of hunters in particular. Hunters in particular had a huge voice in that. We outright beat it when it was 500,000 acres in the House. It got voted down. When the bill went over to the Senate, Mike Lee from Utah. I swear to God, it's his lifetime ambition to sell off all of our public lands. I don't understand it, but that's his perspective. It all needs to be sold. He introduced a deal in there to sell off 3 million acres in the National Forest Service and on the Bureau of Land Management. There's two major parts of federal land management, two services that run things. National Forest Service, in big broad terms, if there's trees on it, the National Forest Service runs it. If there's no trees, it's the Bureau of Land Management.
5 minutes till we close.
I can kick out a window. And so there was going to be 3 million acres sold off out of those two. He ended up taking it out of the Forest Service stuff, which brought it down to 1 million BLM land. And there was such an outcry from hunters. I loved it. Hunters primarily. And he ended up pulling it out, just voluntarily pulling it out because it created such a problem. And there was 5 Republicans in the House that had redlined that. And if that part of it came back to them in the bill, they were not going to vote for it. So it was not going to pass.
We need to be shut down.
So
I appreciate
talk
you
all
coming
day,
out.
man.
I love hearing you talk. By the way, if you brought your phones, if there's one of these on the door, you take this with you. You want to join me, okay?
I do. I was just going to hand some.
Okay, I want to see you there.
Yeah.
We are going to sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
That's not myself. This is, that's the term you get if you join VHA.